right, so next up, how are we going to use the pivot zone? So in this video, I want to keep things simple and sweet. I just picked a couple of examples and I'm going to show you how the pivot zones are used. In a later video, we're going to look at live examples. I mean, we are going to look at examples from the market, but ones from the last 2 weeks or so. There's quite some examples. And then in a later video, I'm going to go live into the market to see what's happening, because that's also valuable. But just to get the point across, I picked some examples from the, I think, last 2 or 4 weeks that we can dive into. So why the pivot zones? I just want to quickly recap this. Helping in determining important point of interest, take profit targets, invalidations, and they act as support resistance levels. We're going to discuss each of these in our examples, except for invalidations. It's a little bit more advanced, and the other 3 are also the main use cases in my opinion. And so the invalidations I will discuss, but in a later video. So let's dive into things. I've prepared some examples. I quickly want to start with the main way of using it, and shout out to Trader Tim. And that is, using it for important point of interest. So what Tim did here is he looked at, okay, my pivot zones are here. So if you zoom in a little, you can see that the pivot zones, this is the daily pivot zone high, daily pivot zone low. And what he said, look how nice the P1 zones are lining up with TA. And what he means with that is that he has a supply zone right here at the top, in that, right at the edge of that P1 zone. So what you know then is that if price comes there first, that could make for a great use case to put in a daily high there, followed by a daily low, because we know that if we take out the daily low after, that's what makes it a P1, right? Because you want it to be the first pivot of the day, as we've seen in the P1, P2 videos. And guess what happened? So this is the same chart, only mine looks a little bit different, but it's the same price action. It's the same chart, because P1 was put in right at that supply zone, rejected, and then went down to take out that P2. So you can see this way we're using it to get extra confluence in whether or not a supply zone is powerful, like how do you call it? Well, supply demand zone, support resistance zone, whatever you're using. And in this case, it also helps us determine the direction of the day pretty much, because if we know this is going to be P1, then we know we're looking for targets, somewhere here at the lows. So that's one example. The next example I want to show you as well, that, well, you'll see it's not just all hindsight. In this post here, I pretty much was saying this was the first retracement we've had on Bitcoin in a while. And the most important part is here. I just want to quickly, another interesting thing is where the bottom of the 80% P2 interval is. It's right around the point of interest I laid out in the quoted post for a potential weekly bottom. And then I shared this chart right here. So this was the bottom, because I recognized this would be, and there's a lot of other TA involved as well, or there's some basic TA actually, but this was an important volume level. This was the first retracement we've had in a very long time. So naturally, this was a very important level to look at. And you can see that it would be this was in a very bullish environment. So you can see it would be very uncommon to go below this here. And even more so, we're in a bullish environment, so it doesn't make that much sense to go. It makes even less sense to go lower. So this was the thing I was looking at. And as you can see here, this helps with estimating realistic targets for the week. And also, well, blah, blah, blah. But so this was my target for the week. And then price went into there. This is the next example already. I'll just go to the chart right there. And then what happened is that price dumped into that, because which one was it? It was exactly, I still know it. It was this low right there. I'll just use this one. It's not really supply zone, but whatever. Just to make it look the same. So it was this low right here. You can see here, I'll just grab it. This is where I was looking at it. And then bam, beautiful low, which pretty much is still holding, just besides its extreme leverage wick. But very, very, very nice to see, right? So this is how you add extra confluence. A final example of that was here on Solana, where I said the same thing. I shared this chart and I highlighted this point of interest. The reason I did that, and we'll go into that because I do want to show you how to use this. So this was this point of interest, And I mean, you can already see where we bounced from. And the reason I said it is because we have this massive SR flip level right here, obvious support, very high chance of a bounce there after such a move up. Not only a high chance of a bounce regardless, we also had the weekly P2 zone right there. So it's right in the middle of that weekly P2 zone. So you know it's not going to go a lot lower than that. Then, you know, Solana is also in a bullish uptrend, and you put all these things together, and then it works very well. So here, I think it's already pretty clear how you can use it to form a bias on support and resistance zones. Because as you can see, you know, maybe on Solana, to elaborate on that, say you're in a short. Now we've discussed a lot about important point of interest, but also regarding take profit targets. Say you're in a short and you know you're not gonna target a lot lower than this, right? Because it's very improbable to go lower than this. So this will help greatly with managing greed and managing your expectations during the week or during the day, and so on. Now, and well, by the way, the same can be said for also here on Bitcoin, because I know people were in a short here, for example, targeting 84K. And I was one of the few that was saying, well, that's very unreasonable. We're probably not going to get there. And one of the reasons was this support zone together with some basic TA. So if you were in a short and you were getting very greedy, targeting 84K, guess what you're left with? Absolutely nothing, right? Because prices kept grinding up after this. So this is how to use them as important point of interest and take profit targets. Then support resistance levels. I mean, I would suggest doing some backtesting on it yourself, because don't take my word for it, just see it for yourself. But I did gather quite some examples, or quite some. This is only like the last 1 or 2 weeks or something that I gathered. So this, for example, is the weekly. You can see this is Bitcoin, Solana, and Ethereum in the same week. I mean, look at that. Bounce off the weekly P1 interval low, bounce off the weekly P1 interval low, bounce of the weekly P1 interval low. And this is actually something that happens quite a lot. So I also want to make the note immediately that, you know, a wick, because I get this question a lot, a wick below this does not mean that it's completely invalidated, right? You have to see this more or less as a zone. So it doesn't matter if price is wicks below it. It's also not impossible to, even if it goes a little bit further, to go above it. You have to understand that this is a very close approximation of where 80% of P1s will be put in, very close. But if it wicks below it, or just has like a small move below it, that doesn't invalidate the idea. I would still count that as a very valid point to put in a pivot, especially since they seem to be acting as support resistance. As you can see, for example, here, we can move on to the next videos. Okay, so here are some examples from other members as well for support resistance. Here, look at where ETH rejected from to the dollar on the daily. Magic again, tapped right at the high there, or well, pretty much exhausted. Here, this is such a badass tool, really helps bring confluence to scalp. Rejected there from the high of the P1 zone. Here was me messing around with 1 hour pivot zones. I'd never used them before, and then someone said, oh, they actually work pretty good. And then I saw it actually rejected from the 1 hour P1 zone. It was also the session P1 high, and that's actually also a good one. I haven't even discussed that. I don't think I have an example of that either, but if you have a daily P2 zone high and a session P2 zone high, that's actually great confluence for resistance, for example. Here, same, well, look where we found support of the dollar to the dollar. Here is a couple of examples, ETH, SOL, and Bitcoin on the day. You can see, well, you see here as well, P1 in the zone, and then P2's right at the edge of this zone right here. You can see that's where it found resistance. So once again, for the day, if you're a day trader, great targets. Here once more, bounce from that zone. I think I have one more. Yeah. Here I was looking at, so this is the confluence I was talking about. ADA just hit the edge of the 1 hour P2 zone plus the session and 4 hour P1 zone. So then you have the P2 zone on the 1 hour and session P1. And then you can see it also rejected from there, right? So just a couple examples to show you that they do seem, in fact, to be acting as support resistance levels. Once again, I really urge you to do some backtesting on it. Don't take my word for it, just see it for yourself. But we suspect, at first I actually thought it was coincidence. The first time I saw it, one of my members, or we saw it, one of my members asked, "Is this a coincidence?" And I said, "Yes, probably." But now we're just seeing it all the time. So we have concluded, as you can see in some other posts as well, that I don't have here, but some of my members agree with me that it's happening too often for it to be a coincidence. So what we're thinking is that it's because of how the algorithms work, since markets are mostly controlled by algorithms. But so I hope that gives a little bit of idea on how you can use them to determine important point of interest, take profit targets, and that you see that they can in fact act as support resistance levels, so you can use them as confluence in that way as well. With that said, in the next video, we're going to look at some live examples, and we're also going to look at the indicator, because we're using indicator for this. You don't have to map them out yourself. So that's waiting in the next videos. So I will catch you there.